Hey guys, tonight we crawl into the dark, creaking stillness of a medieval peasant hut. The walls aren't made of stone. They're not even wood. They're mud mixed with straw animal dung and whatever else the neighbors had lying around. The roof groans in the wind like it might fall in at any moment. It smells like old smoke sour wool, something vaguely roasted, and a dozen unwashed humans. And you've just been dropped right into the middle of it. Your bed. It's a flattened pile of straw that's maybe only a little damp if you're lucky. You're huddled close to a fire that's more smoke than flame. Your breath forming little clouds in the stale air. Somewhere nearby a goat sneezes. And now the real fun begins. Because winter in a medieval village wasn't cozy, it was war. Every night was a test. A test of how long your fire could smolder, how long your layers could hold the warmth in, and whether you could fall asleep without freezing to death or inhaling so much smoke you woke up coughing. If you woke up at all. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to post where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing how far this sleepy little channel reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie still. Beneath you, the straw has flattened into a stiff mat over a packed earth floor. There's a thin dusting of ash from last night's fire underfoot. No blanket, just a wool tunic stiff with body oils, a second tunic over that, and an old sackcloth someone sewed into a half-decent cloak. The fire's the room's heart, but it's a sad heart tonight, more coals than flame. You watch it nervously. The worst sound in winter isn't the wind or the howling animals. It's the soft, final sigh of your hearth dying. That's why the oldest person in the room, maybe a grandmother, maybe someone who looks like one from years of frostbitten winters, has just shuffled over and begun to poke around in the ash. She's not starting a new fire. She's doing what every peasant had to learn: fire banking. It's a delicate little art. You don't let the fire burn down to nothing, or you've got hours of panic in the dark trying to strike flint and breathe life into cold wood. Instead, you bury the embers like glowing treasure under a mound of ash. Too little and they go out. Too much and they smother, but just right. And they stay warm until dawn. You hope she knows what she's doing. The air is sharp. Not quite freezing, but biting. Historians still argue whether most peasant huts ever got truly warm in winter, or whether everyone just got used to being sort of almost dead from the cold for 3 months straight. You press your hands to your face. They smell of smoke and old onions. Your breath, foggy and sharp, condenses instantly. You keep your mouth closed, breathing through your nose, remembering what the elder muttered earlier. Breathe wrong, and your lungs'll crack like river ice. You think she was joking, you hope. From the corner comes a muffled grunt. Someone, possibly a child, rolls over and accidentally elbows someone else in the ribs. A soft curse. A thud. A snore that restarts itself like a broken bellows. This is how you sleep in a pile. One massive tangled heap of humans, layered like lasagna. The strongest or oldest sleep in the middle where it's warmest. The unlucky drift toward the edges near the damp, drafty walls. You're somewhere in between. You can feel someone's elbow under your ribs. Someone's foot is definitely using your thigh as a pillow. And somewhere above your head, a chicken is gently pecking at your hair. Welcome to the Middle Ages. It's not all suffering. There's a kind of warmth here, literally. With enough bodies, the chill stays outside. Barely. Your feet are cold, your fingers colder, but your core is survivable. And that's the point. In one corner, someone shifts again. You smell cabbage and old wool. A dog lets out a short bark in its sleep. You hear the flap of the house's window, a piece of animal skin nailed loosely over a hole in the wall, flutter and snap. That means more wind is coming. The fire groans. You close your eyes. You're not dreaming of castles or banquets or nights. You're dreaming of heat, of soft beds and dry wool and a fire that doesn't need constant babysitting. You dream of waking up and still being warm. But here's the thing, in the medieval world, waking up at all was a luxury. And as the grandmother finishes patting down the fire bank and gently lowers herself back into the pile beside you, you realize that you've already won tonight's first battle. Now, you just have to survive until morning. The embers glow softly beneath their blanket of ash, but you don't dare trust them just yet. Someone snoring again, deep, rhythmic with a whistle on every third breath. Your back aches from lying on the uneven straw, but you stay still. Movement risks losing what little warmth you've hoarded. The woman who banked the fire, her name might be Anselma, or maybe everyone just calls her Old Ma, gives the heap one last shove, tucking a blanket of burlap more tightly around the outer edge of the sleeping bodies. She's done this every night since anyone can remember. If you were sleeping alone, you'd already be dead. Winter here is not poetic. It's slow murder by temperature. And the only defense you've got fire. Or more specifically, the memory of fire. Because in a world with no radiators, no electric blankets, and no central heating, that glowing pile of embers is everything. It is the heartbeat of the home, the only thing standing between you and the cold earth, pulling the warmth from your bones. So you learn to manage it. Carefully. Patiently. Fire banking, they call it, a simple act that carries the weight of life or death. You remember how you first learned it? A flat piece of wood used to push the embers into a low mound, then covered with a layer of fine, powdery ash. Not too heavy, not too light. If you smother them, they die. If you expose them, they flare up and vanish by midnight. Get it just right, and those tiny orange coals will still be waiting in the morning like little promises. Historians still argue whether this technique was taught formally or passed entirely by oral tradition. Grandmother to granddaughter, father to son, whispered over steaming cauldrons and cold hands. All you know is, if the fire dies, your family will follow not long after. Occasionally someone tosses in something fragrant lavender thyme, maybe even dried mint if they've got it, just to push back the ever-present smell of wet wool, old meat, and smoke that never quite leaves the air. A kind of folk incense meant as much for the soul as the nose. But the fire is not only for heat or ritual. It's for cooking, drying, boiling water to scrub out parasites, chasing away rats. And once in a while for light-hearted entertainment. Not everyone can afford candles, those are for rich folk or religious observances. But now and then, someone will hold a dried mushroom near the edge of the flame to watch it curl and pop. Someone else laughs softly and tells a story, some tale of a man who fed his boots to the fire, hoping the leather would cook like meat. It didn't. You chuckle quietly to yourself. Not because it's funny, because it's real. And real is rare when you're half-starved, half-frozen, and trying to make it until sunrise. There's a superstition, too, that if the fire dies completely in your house during the dead of winter, you're inviting bad spirits in. Not demons exactly, just death. Cold, creeping, invisible death. Some families go as far as drawing symbols in ash around the hearth or tucking a bone into the coals to keep it hungry. You're not sure if that's real, but you are sure you've seen people get very, very nervous when the fire dips too low. The logs tonight are damp. You know because the room fills with smoke every time someone tries to add one. The wood hisses like a snake. You've stuffed a bit of thatch around the cracks in the wall trying to stop the draft, but it's no good. Smoke lingers heavy and low. You all breathe shallow, blinking your stinging eyes, grateful for the one tiny window, really just a hole stuffed with rags. You lie there counting the flickers of orange in the embers, wondering if tomorrow's wood will be any drier. Probably not. Suddenly there's a sharp yelp and a muffled thump. Someone has rolled too far and landed on the floor. A laugh goes around the pile, half amusement, half warning. Don't move. Don't roll. Don't mess up the configuration. There's an unspoken hierarchy to sleep positioning, and violating it can mean spending the night next to the door, which leaks like a cracked canoe. You shift a little closer to the center. Not enough to provoke protest, just enough to feel the warmth radiating from Old Ma's shoulder. She smells like onions and soot. Like safety. Firebanking isn't glamorous. You don't stoke it. You don't feed it like some roaring blaze in a fantasy film. You tend to it, like a sick child, like a grudge, like a promise to see another morning. The hearthstones around the coals crack softly from the cold. A dog curls tighter near the edge, tail over nose. Somewhere outside, the wind moans through the trees. And in that moment, wrapped in stink smoke and stifled breathing, you realize something. This is not misery. It's survival. It's love in its oldest, smokiest form. And that tiny breath of heat still flickering under the ash. That's hope. You don't remember when the pile began to shift. It's gradual, like a landslide made of limbs. One person moves to scratch their leg. Another flops over in their sleep. Before long, you've been edged farther toward the outer rim. And in this particular game of medieval musical beds, being on the edge is a death sentence in slow motion. Welcome to the sacred chaos of the peasant sleep pile. There are no real beds, not unless you're nobility. What you have is straw maybe mixed with heather, or dried reeds if you're lucky, and it's shaped roughly into a communal mattress directly on the floor. Over that might be 1 or 2 layers of threadbare linen, likely stolen from a grain sack or something, once used for drying fish. Pillows. If you're fancy, you get a lump of old wool wrapped in cloth. If you're not, you improvise with an elbow or a bundled tunic. And then, of course, you add people. You sleep together because heat is life. No fire, no problem, just add more cousins. The term lasagna sleep pile isn't historic, obviously, but it's accurate. The oldest and most fragile go in the middle. The grandparents, the infants, the perpetually sickly ones who look like they've been cold since birth. They're the warm filling. Around them are layers of children, parents, the tough and the young, all trying to hold position without getting elbowed into the icy edge. You're part of the outer ring tonight. Congratulations, you're a human windbreak. Someone coughs behind you deep wet and tired. You shift slightly, trying to protect your chest from the air leaking through the nearby crack in the wall. Cold air in, warmth out. Every breath you take is a little war. Historians still argue whether medieval sleep was continuous or broken into multiple shifts. Some evidence suggests that peasants often had first sleep and second sleep with a period in between, for prayer mending or just staring into the dark. It's plausible. After all, when half the household is livestock, and the rest is trying not to die, the odds of sleeping straight through are about the same as waking up in a spa. You try to return to sleep, but someone's foot is now wedged against your hip. Cold and bony like an accusing finger. You dare not move it. The foot might belong to old Ma, or worse, to one of the toddlers who, if startled, could wet themselves and turn the whole straw heap into a steamy compost pile of regret. So you lie still. From somewhere above, a voice whispers, "Shift in closer," someone mutters. "Your legs cold'll steal my warmth." A little girl, not more than 6, scoots deeper into the pile and curls around her older brother. You wonder how many generations have done this exact same dance century after century. In a way, it's comforting. This isn't just how your village sleeps. It's how your ancestors slept before your village even had a name. It's also noisy. Snoring, coughing, wheezing, the occasional creak of a joint or fart of uncertain origin. It's like trying to drift off inside a bagpipe with bronchitis. And still there's a rhythm to it. A strange harmony. The humans hum, breathe, twitch. The livestock grunt. You count the sounds like lullabies. That's when the real problem starts. Someone starts to move too much. The ripple of irritation spreads. First a muttered curse, then a sharp elbow to the ribs, then an awkward shuffle as everyone readjusts to reclaim their personal half-inch of space. You're now dangerously close to the outer wall. There's frost creeping along the inner daub. The chill leaches through your cloak and into your shoulder. You grit your teeth. You need to move back in gently, politely, strategically. You murmur, shifting in and hope the human tide will part for you. It doesn't. Instead, someone grunts and tightens their hold on the heat. Fine, you do it the sneaky way. You slowly slide your hand under the tunic of the person beside you, not inappropriately, just enough to borrow some precious warmth from their armpit zone. This earns you a grumble and a half-hearted slap. Still, it's worth it. That patch of skin is warm, and in winter, warmth is currency. You finally find a pocket of tolerable space between a cousin's leg and someone else's back. You wedge in and exhale a shaky breath. Your nose stings from the cold, but your chest is warmer already. The fire's ashes are still faintly glowing. A miracle. Above your head, a chicken flaps from a rafter, lands on the edge of the pile, and settles down on someone's foot. No one reacts. No one has the energy. You close your eyes again. You think of nothing grand. Not castles or glory. Not banquets or knights. Just the soft crunch of straw, the stale breath of your neighbors, and the occasional cluck of your living feathered blanket. If you're lucky, you'll sleep through till second watch. If not, you'll be back at the edge, clutching straw and staring at frost crawling down the walls like ancient fingers. Either way, you're here. Still breathing. Still warm enough. For now. You wake again, not to light, not to alarm, but to the slow, wet snort of something. Very close. You crack one eye open. A goat is staring back at you. Its breath is warm, rank, and surprisingly comforting. It's pressed so close you can feel the gentle twitch of its nose against your cheek. Congratulations, you've reached the livestock lair. At some point in the night, the warmth from the human pile wasn't enough. Or maybe the goat just got cold. Either way, you're now spooning a farm animal. You'd be horrified if you weren't so grateful. Because in the medieval world, animals weren't just food, they were heaters. Peasant homes were often single-room structures. On one end, people. On the other, livestock. In theory. In practice, everyone just drifted toward the fire. The boundary between human and animal blurred every night when the temperatures dropped. Your bedmates could include pigs, goats, chickens, or even a small cow if it was sick and needed warmth. You adjust your body to give the goat a little more space. It's surprisingly cooperative, curling into your side like a giant breathing bag of stew meat. Someone next to you murmurs something that sounds vaguely like, "Don't let it eat your hair," and drifts back to sleep. You wonder for a moment how this became normal. You, once a person with opinions about hygiene, are now grateful for goat breath. Historians still debate whether sleeping with animals indoors caused more harm than good. On the one hand, warmth. On the other, fleas, lice parasites, and a non-zero chance of being kicked awake by a hoof to the ribs. Still, most scholars agree it was a necessary evil. When its survive or freeze dignity is the first thing you trade. You can hear the soft rustling of feathers near the ceiling. Chickens roost above you on makeshift rafters, really just crooked branches lashed together. They drop the occasional gift onto the pile below. No one bothers cleaning it. Ash covers everything, and you stopped caring long ago. The goat shifts again, bumping your leg with its bony hip. Its body is warm, a little greasy from lanolin and farm grime. It smells like hay, wet fur, and life. You cuddle in closer. There's something deeply primal about this kind of sleep. You're no longer a person in the modern sense. You're a body among bodies, pressed into the earth with straw and steam and survival instincts. You sleep like your ancestors slept, curled into heat, wrapped in smell, blanketed in breath. You pull your cloak tighter. It's not really a cloak. It's a repurposed grain sack someone lined with rabbit fur. You're fairly sure the rabbit died of old age. The fur is patchy, but the lining holds just enough warmth to matter. Your feet are tucked under someone else's thighs, blissfully warm, though you suspect you've been drooled on. Your knees ache from being bent so long. The goat yawns beside you. It sounds disturbingly human. Somewhere in the dark, the firebank lets out a hiss. You peek at it, still holding. The ash mound glows faintly like a dragon's breath under snow. Relief. The air in the room is thick with moisture and smoke. Every surface is damp, but the warmth of all these bodies creates a strange equilibrium. You're sweating and freezing at the same time. You try not to think about the moisture soaking into your only pair of wool leggings. A small child mutters in their sleep and kicks the goat. It grunts in protest but doesn't move. It knows the drill. You wonder if you'll get used to this. If the closeness will stop being strange. If someday you'll think of the goat as cozy instead of barnyard roommate. Judging by the comfort you're feeling now, that day might already be here. You glance toward the makeshift wall, a low, leaning frame stuffed with straw and mud, meant to separate the living area from the animals. It's laughably symbolic. Everyone's mingled together like stew in the perpetual pot by the fire. You close your eyes again and listen. Not to silence, that's a myth. There's never true silence in a peasant hut during winter. You hear the shift of bodies, the crackle of embers, the gentle cluck of a hen above the whisper of a mother, soothing a child through a nightmare. You hear the wind trying to pry open the door, the goat breathing beside you, and always someone snoring like a medieval war horn 3 inches from your face. You are not comfortable, but you are alive. And in a medieval winter, that's enough. You wake to a sensation that's become deeply familiar. The slow, reluctant peeling of your wool tunic from your skin. It's stuck not because it's wet, but because you've worn it every day and night for weeks, maybe months. It has formed a sort of second skin, scratchy, stiff, slightly crusty in places, and surprisingly effective. This is your winter armor, 2 long woolen tunics a belt that used to belong to your older brother's socks, made of matted sheep's wool, and a ragged hood you sleep in to trap what little heat escapes from your head. Your underlayers smell like smoke, sweat, and lard. Not butter, not oil. Lard. Because sometime in early November, someone suggested you rub a little animal fat into the fabric. Keeps out the wind, they said, and the lice don't like it. You weren't sure if it was science or peasant magic, but it worked well enough, and now everything you own smells like bacon that lost a fight. You stretch under your layers, careful not to disturb the goat still snoring beside you. The straw rustles. Someone sneezes. A chorus of groans and creaking joints begins the sound of a medieval household, waking up joints popping like twigs underfoot. There's no changing clothes this morning. There's no fresh pair. There's only what's already on you. Your leggings are stiff near the knees from last night's dew. The wool tunic you sleep in is the one you'll wear all day. The grime has formed a natural barrier. At this point, washing it might be a bad idea. It would lose its character. Historians agree that regular laundering wasn't common among the rural poor, especially in winter. Water was freezing. Soap was rare or homemade from harsh lye and fat, and drying clothes could take days. Clean clothes were a summertime fantasy. Instead, peasants adopted what might now be called a protective patina. You'd scrape off visible dirt, shake out loose straw, maybe spot rub the worst patches with ash or snow, but a full wash. That was for emergencies like fleas infections or weddings. And let's be honest, you're not invited to many weddings. You sit up slowly, wrapped like a rotting onion in layers of wool. The hood falls back. Cold air bites your ears. Your scalp itches where the linen coif beneath your hood is pressed tight. You make a mental note to dig through the ash bucket later. Rubbing a bit into your scalp helps keep lice from setting up shop, or at least convinces them to vacation somewhere else. The goat lets out a half-hearted bleat and shifts. Someone throws a dried beet at it. You're not sure if that was punishment or breakfast. You reach for your boots. They're frozen. Literally. The leather is stiff, curved into the shape of your foot from yesterday. You tug one on anyway, teeth gritted, wondering if this is the day your toes finally revolt and leave. As you do, you remember the time a neighbor tried to warm his boots near the fire too close. They caught flame, and he ran barefoot for weeks afterward. He said the blisters were better than frostbite. Everyone laughed, mostly because it wasn't them. Your cloak is waiting by the door. It's not so much a cloak as it is a frayed wool blanket that's absorbed years of smoke. It smells like 1,000 winter nights, and a little bit like goat. Historians still argue over how many sets of clothes a medieval peasant typically owned. Some say one. Some say two, one for daily life. One Sunday best for church. Others argue even that was a luxury. But in winter, your daily wear was your everything. Washing it meant going without it, and going without it meant frostbite or worse. You hear your brother grumbling from beneath the sleep pile. Something about my cloak's gone. You glance over, you're sitting on it. You pretend not to notice. The hut is slowly coming alive now. A woman stirs the embers. A child pokes at a rat near the door with a stick. Someone is loudly relieving themselves in the corner bucket. You pull your hood low and focus on your socks. One has a hole in the heel. You'll need to mend that tonight, maybe with some coarse thread and your bone needle carved from last summer's leftovers, if you can find it. Last time someone used it to pop a blister. You sigh. You rise layered and armored, smelling like a stew of human resilience. Your clothes don't make you feel clean, but they make you feel ready. Ready for the cold. Ready for the work. Ready for another day of barely surviving. And as you duck your head beneath the low beam of the door, stepping out into the frozen air and blinking at the pale sky, you realize you're still wearing every piece of clothing you own. And that is exactly the plan. You step outside and the air hits your face like a slap made of needles. Not a breeze, not a chill. A full-body ambush. The kind that steals your breath, freezes your nose hairs, and makes your eyes water instantly. You squint into it, inhaling carefully through your nose because you learn the hard way what happens when you don't. Your lungs seize up and you cough like a dying bellows. That's the thing about cold in the Middle Ages. It wasn't something you bundled up against. It was something you fought. Every single breath. You shuffle across the frost-hardened mud outside your home. It's not snowing, but the rime on the ground crackles with every step, and your boots still stiff from their frozen shape bend only slightly. You hug your cloak tighter, tucking your chin into the coarse wool, and breathe out in shallow bursts. Behind you, smoke curls lazily from the hole in the roof, the only chimney most peasants had. And even that's generous. More often, it's just a hole to let out the worst of the smoke. Most of it still clings to your skin, hair, and clothes. It's a permanent smell now, ash and old meat and sweat and wet goat. You reach the well fingers already going numb through the stiff mittens you made from an old pair of breeches. The water has frozen over. Of course it has. You take a rock and crack through the ice crust, careful not to splash yourself. You don't have enough dry clothes to recover from that mistake. Historians still debate whether hypothermia was understood by name in the medieval period. Most likely it wasn't, but its effects were very familiar slurred. Speech confusion, drowsiness, and death that looked like sleep. People said the cold could steal your mind. They weren't wrong. You bring the water inside and set it near the hearth to thaw. The firebank embers are still warm, and Old Ma is feeding it with dry twigs. She kept wrapped in cloth secret stash, squirreled away from the damp pile outside. You nod in silent thanks. Back inside, someone hands you a chunk of barley bread, stale enough to use as a weapon, and a smear of soft cheese that smells like feet. You chew slowly. The food is dense, designed to last. Not designed for joy. You sit by the fire, warming your hands slowly. If you do it too fast, they'll sting worse than before. That's something else you've learned. Frostbitten fingers feel nothing until they feel everything, and then it's agony. Someone tosses a wet log onto the fire. Smoke billows out, filling the hut in seconds. You all cough, wave it away, but no one opens the door. The air outside would freeze the baby in the corner before the smoke ever clears. You simply live in it. Eyes watering, nose burning, your lungs getting seasoned like a ham. There's a moment of eerie stillness as you breathe in through your scarf and out through your teeth. You watch your breath drift in the smoky light. It looks thick like fog in a bad dream. You hold it there for a moment, wondering how many more like it you'll get. The old man across the fire wheezes. He's got a cough that never really went away after last winter. Or the winter before. His daughter offers him a steaming bowl of something from the perpetual stew pot, a combination of turnips, oats, meat scrap, and anything else that hasn't gone rancid yet. It smells like warmth. Like something vaguely alive. You envy him. You glance up at the tiny window, its cloth covering barely holding out the wind. The sunlight is weak, pale, and hesitant, as if even the sun doesn't want to be out in this cold. You remember the story of a traveler from the next village who wandered too far one night. He was found days later curled in a ditch still holding the basket of eggs he'd been delivering. They said he looked peaceful, like he'd fallen asleep. That's the danger. It's not the pain that gets you, it's the numbness. The temptation to stop, to rest, to give in. Your brother steps in from outside, cheeks, red fingers shaking as he tries to untie a bundle of firewood. His hands won't obey. You help him slowly. He mutters thanks through clenched teeth. The cold makes everything harder, tying knots, thinking clearly, even being kind. You stoke the firebank again carefully this time. You push some ash aside, blow gently, and the embers flare to life. It's not much, but it's fire. And in the medieval winter, fire is everything. You glance around the room. No one's talking much. Just the scrape of bowls, the snap of twigs, the muffled coughs and sniffles. You lean back against the mud wall, feeling the cold seep in through your cloak, and you close your eyes for a moment. Not to sleep, just to pause, just to be still. Because every movement costs warmth. Every breath costs moisture. And winter cold creeping constant is always collecting. You're sitting beside the hearth now, staring into the one thing that never truly dies in this house, the perpetual stew. It's a cast iron cauldron that's been hanging over the same fire for weeks, maybe longer. No one remembers when it was last emptied. Maybe never. Every day something is added. A chopped onion, some old barley scraps of salted pork, yesterday's crusty bread, a wild herb that someone swears isn't poisonous. It simmers slowly, thickening with time and memory. Every layer adds a story, and probably a new bacterium. You poke at it with a ladle carved from ashwood. It's warm. It's thick. It smells like everything and nothing at the same time. Your stomach growls. The stew is the center of everything in winter. It's your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner. It's how you stay warm from the inside out. And it never stops. Even at night, the coals are banked so it doesn't go cold. You just keep feeding it, and it feeds you back. Historians confirm that the practice of perpetual stew was not just a folk tale. It was a real survival technique among the poor in medieval Europe. The French even had a term for it, pot au feu, a pot on the fire always. In some villages, the same stew base was kept simmering for months. Occasionally, they'd throw in a rabbit, or a boot. Depends how desperate things got. You ladle some into your bowl. It slurps thickly the surface broken by a wilted carrot and a suspiciously chewy-looking chunk of something. You don't ask, you just eat. Steam rises, your cheeks thaw a little. For a moment you feel human again. Beside you a small boy slurps loudly from his wooden spoon. He has a smear of grease on his chin and the vacant, satisfied stare of someone who doesn't yet know what hunger really means. You envy him. Behind you someone throws more peat onto the fire. It smolders more than it burns, earthy, slow, and pungent. Wood is scarce out here. Peat dug from the ground in sticky clumps is what you burn when forests are far, and trees are forbidden. It keeps the stew going, and it keeps you from freezing. The smell is thick and not entirely unpleasant like mushrooms and wet socks in history. You lean closer to the fire, letting the heat soak into your fingers. It's a dangerous luxury. Get too close and you might catch your cloak on fire. Or fall asleep. And falling asleep by the fire is a risky game. If you shift wrong, you could smother it. Or worse, kick over the pot. That happened once. Last winter. A man named Bertel, drunk on homebrew, knocked the pot over with his boot and splashed half the coals into the straw bedding. The room nearly burned down. Now no one drinks near the hearth. And Bertel sleeps near the door. A woman crouches beside you with a handful of wild herbs. She adds a pinch to the pot thyme, or maybe winter savory, and gives it a slow stir. Everyone's got a theory on what keeps the stew from turning. A clean ladle. Stirring clockwise only. Never let the bottom burn. Add garlic if someone's sick. Add salt if someone dies. The stew is part medicine, part tradition, part hope made edible. You glance toward the ceiling where strings of drying roots and fish hang from the rafters. They sway gently like ghosts. Some of them are just for show now, too dried, too shriveled to eat. But they remind you of summer, of the idea that food once grew here. Outside, a thin crust of frost covers everything. The livestock stomp and snort huddled close to the walls. The door groans as someone pushes it open just enough to dump out the chamber pot and dart back in. Your bowl is nearly empty. You scrape the bottom and lick the spoon. A piece of barley clings to your lip. You eat it anyway. The child beside you asks, "What's for dinner?" and someone else replies, "This." Again. No one laughs. It's not a joke. It's just truth. But you don't complain, because the stew is warm, and it's here. And as long as it's here, so are you. Historians argue whether perpetual stew ever truly spoiled, or if the constant simmering killed anything dangerous. But you don't think about that. You just thank the fire, and the pot, and whoever tossed in the last handful of beans. Because in this cold, dark world, the stew is more than a meal. It's your last line of defense, and it's bubbling. Just enough. You're standing now, bowl in hand, scraping the last bit of stew with your thumb, when someone passes behind you and casually tosses a handful of ashes across the floor. You don't react, no one does. It's just another morning ritual, odd to modern eyes maybe, but deeply practical in your world. Because this isn't just some strange medieval superstition. The ash helps keep things clean. Well, cleanish. The floor beneath your feet isn't wood. It isn't even stone. It's dirt. Packed earth, cold and unforgiving. And without any modern sanitation, it would be a muddy, germ-ridden nightmare. So you throw ash on it. Ash has mild antiseptic properties, and it helps absorb moisture smells and spills. Spilled stew tossed some ash. Someone's chamber pot overflowed. More ash. Someone sneezed and left something... Unfortunate, you know what to do. Historians confirm that ashes were a staple of medieval cleanliness, especially in homes that lacked basic flooring or drainage. They weren't just trash, they were tools. You even use them to scrub dishes, sometimes your teeth. You kick some into the corner with your boot and move on. Today your job is to check the firewood, which is a joke. Because there's no firewood. Not really. Your pile is 3 damp logs, one of which may be more mushroom than tree. The other is splintered so badly it's more kindling than log. The third... Well, it's already been burned once partially and pulled from the fire when someone realized it was still useful. You sigh. You pick through the pile and choose the least moldy. It smells like damp forest and sadness. You carry it to the hearth where the fire bank still glows under its ash lid. You poke at the coals, gently feeling around for the warmest parts. You place the log just off-center close enough to start warming, not so close it'll suck the life out of the coals. Someone behind you clears their throat. Not in irritation, but in the coded language of, I hope we have enough to get through the night. You don't answer. The answer is probably not. You glance toward the door. Outside, the woodlot has been picked clean. No trees remain near the village. Any that do are claimed by the manor lord who charges for their use or beats you for stealing. You remember the tale of a boy who took a dead branch and got 3 days in the stocks for it. So instead of wood, you burn peat, or dried dung, or bundles of straw soaked in old fat. It's not about flame, it's about anything that gives off heat without killing you. You reach into the corner bin and pull out a few pieces of cow dung already dried hard and flat. You break one in half and add it to the fire. The smell is immediate, sharp, earthy, oddly comforting. You're used to it. A little boy next to you plugs his nose and glares. Better stink than freeze, you mutter, tossing in another. He doesn't disagree. You squat beside the fire again, this time with your hands out. You rotate them slowly, letting the warmth seep in. You wish it was a proper blaze. But proper blazes need fuel, and fuel is precious. Behind you, someone is stitching a pair of mittens from old cloth and rabbit fur. Another is sharpening a knife with a stone so worn it's more suggestion than tool. A girl with flushed cheeks stirs the perpetual stew again, adding what looks like a handful of sour berries. You glance around the room and realize everything here has already lived a full life. The cloak on your back was once a blanket. The blanket was once a curtain. The curtain was once part of someone's wedding clothes. Everything is reused. Everything carries history. You look down at your boots and remember the time your father patched them using animal sinew. The stitches still hold ragged but dependable. Even your belt once belonged to your uncle, whose name is still faintly carved into the leather. That's how things are passed down here, not through wealth, but through scraps that survive the seasons. The fire begins to sputter, catching on the edge of the dung patty. It flares briefly. You lean in, blow gently, and it takes a flicker of real flame. You don't cheer. You don't smile. You just nod. It's working. For now. Historians argue over how peasants kept track of the days during long winters when the sky was always gray and clocks didn't exist. Some say they marked time by church bells. Others say they didn't track it at all. They just lived day to day, meal to meal, breath to breath. You believe it. Because right now, that's how it feels. You stretch your hands over the smoke again, take a deep breath, and let the warmth reach your core. Tomorrow you'll gather more dung. You'll check the thatch for leaks. You'll stir the stew and hope someone traps a hare. But today, you made fire. You're outside again, this time not by choice. The cold is sharper today, slicing into your cheeks and across your knuckles like a dull blade rubbed in salt. You breathe through a cloth wrapped over your mouth, not for style, but because the wind will burn your throat raw if you don't. Your fingers have gone stiff inside your mittens. The air smells like ice and livestock and smoke-soaked wool. But you have a job. Everyone does. Winter doesn't care if you're tired. Winter doesn't care if you're cold. Winter wants your bones, and the only way to deny it is to move. Your task: dig into the compost midden, the massive steaming pile at the edge of the village. It's disgusting. It's steaming. And it's one of the few places that's actually warm. Because that heap of rotting straw manure, spoiled food, and broken dreams is decomposing. And decomposition creates heat. You shove your pitchfork into it and flip a layer, watching the steam rise in thick tendrils. It stinks. Horribly. But that means it's working. That means the village has a natural radiator. You pause a moment to warm your gloved hands in the steam. It's gross. It's also glorious. Your hands tingle from the sudden change in temperature. You flex your fingers. You feel them again. Barely. Historians point to these waste heaps as multi-purpose tools in peasant life. Fertilizer, sure. But also heat sources. Sometimes even hiding places for root vegetables or jugs of cider. Once someone lost a chicken in one and found it 3 days later alive, warm, and quite smug. You keep digging. Moving keeps the blood flowing. A girl nearby is collecting animal droppings with a straw basket and a stick. She doesn't flinch. She's too used to it. The waste will be dried and used as fuel. You toss another forkful over your shoulder. It hits with a wet slap. The smell follows. You try not to gag, but even that gag feels like warmth. Because your insides are working, and that means you're still here. You finish your shift and walk to the side wall of the house. There you check the thatch lining. It's coming loose. Wind whistles through a tiny seam. You grab a bundle of spare thatch, damp heavy, and wedge it into the gap. You tie it off with old twine made from twisted horsehair. It's not beautiful. But it holds. You hear a chicken squawk somewhere behind you. You glance back just in time to see it being tucked under someone's arm and brought inside, probably to nest near the fire for the night. Chickens don't lay well when they're frozen solid. Next, you check the clay pots buried near the wall and underground food cache where root vegetables are stored to keep from freezing. You lift a flat stone, find a few limp parsnips and a moldy turnip. Not great, but not empty. You replace the lid and cover it back with dirt. Historians still argue over how well food preservation worked in these rudimentary caches. The general consensus: it was better than nothing. Cold preserved, yes, but too much moisture spoiled things. So you gamble. Every buried pot is a roll of the dice. You walk around the house once more, checking the eaves, the door frame, the patches of wattle and daub crumbling from frost. You press a cow pat into a crack in the wall. Smooth it with your hand, it seals the wind out. And yes, it's disgusting, but it works. You head back inside, skin itching from the cold. Your boots leave brown prints on the floor. Someone scowls. You kick off the worst of it and hunch near the fire. A boy is trying to tie a bone hook to a length of gut cord. He's making a trap. Maybe for rats, maybe for weasels. Whatever it catches, it'll end up in the stew. He grins at you gap-toothed and asks if you want to help. You do, because it's warm by the fire. And tying something with purpose feels good. He hands you a splintered needle, its eye barely holding together. You thread it with the gut cord. You show him how to loop and knot. It takes both of you 5 tries, but eventually the hook holds. The boy nods solemnly. That'll catch something, he says. Let's hope it's not someone's toe, you reply. He laughs. It's the only laugh you've heard all day. The wind howls outside. It sounds like wolves, though. It's probably just the rafters shifting again. You sit a little closer to the boy, to the hook, to the fire. Because when winter howls outside your walls, there's nothing more powerful than a shared task. Even if that task is sewing a rat trap with a needle made of bone and a thread made of guts. Even if your gloves smell like compost. Even if your boots are falling apart and your stomach is rumbling again. You've got a roof. You've got a fire. You've got stew bubbling and traps being made and the cold kept mostly outside. And for today, that's victory. Later that day, you step back outside, this time with purpose. You're going to the common barn, a long, low structure that serves as half storage, half shelter, and full community lifeline during winter. It creaks with every gust of wind like it's singing a tired lullaby to the creatures sleeping within. The moment you step inside, the smell hits you like a quilt to the face. Not a fresh one. A heavy, ancient one soaked in centuries of straw dung and fermented hay breath. And strangely enough, it's comforting. Because in here, surrounded by cows, goats, pigs, and sleep-steaming oxen, it's warm. Not cozy, not dry, but warmer than outside and warmer than most homes without a fire. The beasts shift slowly in their pens, creating a wet fog of body heat and manure vapor. Chickens cluck quietly from their rafters, huddled close. A pig snores like a drunk uncle in a tavern. And through it all, you move carefully, boots, squelching cloak tucked close. This is one of the secrets of peasant winter survival: shared heat, even from animals. The more bodies, the more warmth. It's not poetic, it's practical. You grab a hay fork and begin to turn the straw. The top layer is brittle stiff with frost. The bottom is damp and steaming. You dig through it, flipping and fluffing, to keep the bedding dry enough to avoid rot and warm enough for insulation. It's called deep littering, a method peasants used where instead of cleaning out manure every day, they simply added new straw on top. Over time, the bottom layers begin to decompose, generating natural heat. Not much, but in winter, even 5 degrees can mean the difference between a sick cow and a living one. Historians have noted this method as a quiet innovation, an accidental composting system that also served as crude insulation for both animal and human alike. In some barns, peasants would sleep in the hayloft above, letting the rising warmth of animal breath and rot keep them from freezing. You work steadily, humming to yourself. The cows snort in appreciation. One licks your elbow, another tries to eat your hem. You swat it gently. Further down the barn, someone else is milking a goat, murmuring softly to keep it calm. The tin pail rings faintly with each stream. The sound is sweet, familiar, alive. You stop by the wall where bundles of dried nettles and yarrow hang, herbs collected in summer, and now slowly vanishing into stews, teas, and poultices. You take a pinch for later. Someone has a cough again. Might be time for nettle broth. You kneel by one of the oxen, its broad face lowered toward the trough. You press your palm to its neck. It's hot. really hot. You lean into that warmth, close your eyes for a moment, and pretend you're in a bathhouse. You've never been in a bathhouse, but the dream is there, a place where water's warm and clean and doesn't bite your fingers. You pull back and pat the ox's side. It twitches but doesn't move. You begin stacking small bundles of hay into the storage nook near the back. It's thin stuff harvested late and dry. You'll have to stretch it. If the animals don't eat enough, they stop producing milk. And if they stop producing milk, the children get sick. It's all connected. Everything in this place is balanced on a brittle web of just enough. You find a broken bucket and set it aside for mending. Later, maybe you'll fix it with waxed linen thread and a patch of boiled leather. It won't hold water perfectly, but it'll carry grain, or stones, or ash. That's all that matters. You spot a few rats in the corner darting through the straw. You don't chase them. Not now. Maybe tonight you'll set a trap. One of them is missing a tail. You recognize it. You named it once Squire Nibble. He pauses, looks at you, then vanishes again. He's a menace, but he's also one more creature surviving the same fight you are. Back outside, the sky is already darkening. It's not even late. The days are short now. The sun barely skims the earth before retreating again. You haul your bundle of hay back to the house, trailing straw and warm breath behind you. The door creaks open, letting out a puff of stew air and smoke. Inside, the others are sitting close stitching, mending, feeding the fire. Someone started a new story, a tale about a ghost in the woods. A girl made of snow who steals children who cry too loud. You've heard it before. It still makes your skin prickle. You sit near the hearth, lay the hay down for patting, and hand over the herbs. Someone thanks you. Another offers you a mug of something hot. It's bitter, maybe nettle, maybe bark, doesn't matter. You sip, curl your feet under your cloak, and listen to the fire. It's still burning. The animals are fed. The barn is dry. And for tonight, that's what survival looks like. Night falls like a wool blanket soaked in frost. Heavy, dark, and full of tiny, biting teeth. There's no dramatic sunset, no golden hour. Just a slow thickening of shadow as if the light gets tired and slinks away without a word. The house dims even with the fire still burning. Candles are a luxury. Lanterns. Forget it. You make do with the glow of coals and the pale smear of moonlight creeping through a cloth-covered window. It's time to prepare for sleep, which is both a ritual and a battlefield. You roll out your section of the shared bedding, a lump of straw stuffed into a coarse cloth sack, now half empty from leaks and flattened from weight. Someone's patched it 3 times this winter with scraps of wool and fish glue. It crinkles like dry paper, but holds just enough shape to soften your spine. Tonight, you'll be sleeping closer to the wall, which is both a blessing and a curse. The wall leaks cold like a dying god leaks secrets. But at least no one will roll onto your face. You take off your outer cloak, but keep on everything else. Even your shoes. You're not risking frostbitten toes because someone kicked the fire too hard at midnight. You tuck your hands into your armpits, curl your legs tight, and bury your nose in your hood. Beside you, a child is already snoring. Across the room, someone coughs into the thick air. The baby stirs, but doesn't cry. That's a small miracle. Someone drapes a blanket made from stitched-together rabbit pelts across the middle of the pile. You feel the weight of it settle over your knees. Warmth spreads slowly, shared through layered legs and backs and bellies pressed against each other. Like wolves in a den. Like human batteries. Historians debate how common true beds were in peasant homes. Some say straw mattresses were shared by entire families. Others argue that in winter, most just slept directly on the floor, packed together for warmth like cords of wood. Either way, privacy wasn't part of the deal, nor was space. You close your eyes and try to ignore the smell. It's not bad exactly, just alive. Wood smoke, unwashed wool, the tang of ash and boiled turnip, and the faint ammonia bite of someone's chamber pot. It's the smell of people surviving, the smell of, we made it through today, and there's comfort in that. You think about the fire bank banked once again beneath ash and careful hands. You hope it holds. If not, someone will have to relight it in the dark, blowing on embers with frozen lungs, cursing fate and wet logs. A few feet away, an old woman mumbles a half-prayer, half-spell under her breath. Something about St. Bridget and warm milk. No one stops her. Even the skeptical stay quiet. In winter, every superstition becomes insurance. You feel the rhythm of breath around you. The soft, slow, and out of people too tired to dream. You let it lull you. You imagine floating on it. A tide of shared exhaustion. Then from outside, a crack. You freeze. Everyone does. The sound wasn't loud, just sharp, splintering, like ice breaking or a branch snapping. You wait. Nothing follows. Then a creak from the roof. The thatch groans as the wind presses against it. Snow slides down the slope with a whispery hiss. Just weather. Just winter pressing in like it always does. Someone exhales loudly. Someone else mutters, "It's nothing," in a voice that convinces no one. Still, no one moves. There's no point. What could you do? Run into what? You just pull your hood tighter and shift your feet deeper into the warmth of the pile. You stare at the dark above where bundles of herbs and strips of jerky sway faintly in the draft. You count them. You name them. Thyme, sage, nettles, parsnip ends, hope. Then another sound. Not outside. Inside. A wet plop. Silence. Then someone sighs and mutters, "Chamber pot's full." Groans ripple through the pile. A few sleepy curses. But again, no one moves. It's not worth it. You drift slowly, gently into sleep. A sleep without dreams, just the long descent into unconscious survival. And even that is a privilege, because not everyone in the village has warmth tonight. Not everyone has fire or stew or a goat to snuggle. Some are alone. Some didn't make it back from gathering wood. Some made it back, but not all the way. And some just gave up. You breathe out. Your body slips deeper into the shared warmth. Your fingers twitch, the wind howls. But in this room packed with limbs and breath and ancient wool, you are alive. And in winter, that is the final triumph. You wake before dawn. Not because you want to, because your body forces you. The cold has crept in during the night, sliding down the back of your neck like a curious ghost. You feel it in your joints and the tips of your ears and the ache of your shoulders pressed against the frozen floor. The fire has died. Or rather, it's hiding. Banked under last night's ash, maybe still clinging to a smoldering coal or two. You know better than to assume it's gone. You know it just needs help. So you slip out of the warm tangle of sleeping bodies. Quiet. Careful. Every movement is a negotiation. Step on the wrong limb and someone will growl. Or worse, roll over and expose the warmth you desperately need preserved. You creep toward the hearth, wrapped in your cloak like a makeshift cocoon. The cold stabs at your ankles. The stone under your feet is less floor and more ice sculpture made by someone who hates toes. You kneel by the hearth and begin the ancient ritual. First, lift the ash lid gently. If you're lucky, you'll see the faint red of embers beneath. If you're not, it's a long morning. Today you're lucky. A faint glow, barely alive, but there, you grab a handful of dry straw crumpled tight and wrapped in a twist of wool. You whisper to it. You coax it close. You blow. A gentle exhale. Again and again, until the ember winks awake and kisses the straw. It flares, bites, crackles, a tiny stubborn promise of heat. You add a splinter of wood, a pinch of dried dung, a few shavings from yesterday's kindling. The fire responds slowly, like an old man rising from a deep nap. Stiff, grumpy, but alive. You sit back, rubbing your hands together, watching the flicker bloom into something stronger. The room is still dim. Only outlines of bodies and baskets and drying herbs are visible in the orange half-light. Someone coughs. Someone mutters in their sleep. You don't wake them, not yet. Instead, you turn toward the clay pot by the door, the one holding the water. You crack the thin layer of ice on top with a stick. It makes a sound like glass breaking in a dream. You pour a little into a blackened kettle and place it over the fire. Tea is too luxurious a word. It's hot water with hope. Maybe nettles, maybe a crust of barley, maybe just heat. But when you sip it, your fingers remember how to move. Your chest loosens. Your thoughts thud back into place like thawing stones. Outside, the sky begins to shift from pitch to bruised gray. No birds, just silence and the groan of wood expanding under frost. You step out briefly to check the morning traps. Near the outer wall, you spot it. A rat, dead, caught clean, neck broken, no waste. You lift it by the tail, muttering a silent thanks to whoever made the bone hook. It's small, but it's protein. And in a world where stew defines your existence, protein is everything. Back inside, someone has stirred. You hand them the kettle. They nod. No words. The fire grows. Shadows retreat. Someone else adds 2 shriveled apples to the stew pot, core and all. Another drops in a handful of oats. It's not much, but it turns the pot cloudy and rich. The rat is skinned with practiced hands. The meat is boiled. The bones saved maybe for needle carving later, or to flavor another pot down the line. Nothing is wasted, ever. You pull on your boots still damp from yesterday. They resist at first, but your toes surrender. You You stomp them down. Ready. Today is laundry day, which is only funny because it's too cold to wash anything. But you'll still do it. Because if you don't, the grime layers will stop being insulation and start being disease. So you haul out the wooden tub, scrape the inside, and collect the gray water from last night's dishwashing. You add a handful of wood ash and stir it with a stick. That's your soap. No lavender, no bubbles, just ash and water and grit. You wring out the only spare tunic you have, hang it from the rafters, and pray it doesn't freeze into a tunic-shaped icicle before nightfall. Historians argue about how often peasants truly cleaned their clothing. Some claim weekly washing with lye. Others believe only the wealthiest did so regularly. What's agreed on is this winter washing was rare hard and often dangerous. You could freeze your fingers, or worse, your lungs. Still you scrub. Elbows aching, knuckles red, water turning gray. Someone offers you a crust of bread. You break it in half and dip it into the kettle, watching it absorb the heat like a miracle. You eat. You don't smile. But something in your chest thaws just slightly. Behind you, the baby begins to cry. Someone else wakes and sings softly off-key but full of warmth. A man pulls on his cloak and mutters about checking the fences. A woman grinds herbs with a stone and checks on the sick. And you sip hot water. You look out at the rising light. You survived another night. You head toward the back of the house where the makeshift sewing station has taken over a corner. It's not a proper bench, just a wide board laid across two buckets with a cracked bowl of bone needles, a few tangles of spun wool, and something that might have been thread in a past life. This is where winter truly tests your patience. Because today is repair day, and your task is to salvage what's left of the family's socks, mittens, and cloaks before they unravel entirely. You pick up a bone needle filed from the femur of some long-eaten hair, still slightly curved. The thread is wool teased from old garments and twisted back together by hand. You slide into place beside a woman darning a boot with a fishbone awl and a child sewing buttons made from deer antler slices. No one speaks. There's no need. This isn't a social event. This is survival with stitches. You begin with your mittens. Well, half mittens, really. The thumbs are missing and one palm has split open. You press the edges together, then start working the needle in with the precision of someone mending skin, not fabric. Because these mittens are the only thing between your hands and frostbite tomorrow morning. The wool is scratchy, uneven. The needle bites your thumb. The child sneezes beside you and wipes their nose on their sleeve without looking up. Historians suggest peasant garments were patched so often the original fabric became a minority. What started as a wool cloak could become a patchwork of goat-haired linen burlap and animal hide. If it covered you and didn't smell too bad, it was clothing. Someone nearby is using a bone needle to stitch sheep gut into a lantern casing, trying to seal a tear in the only lantern they have. It smells faintly of stew and smoke. You ask if it'll hold. She shrugs. Long enough. There's a quiet strength in that answer. Long enough is the anthem of winter. A teenage boy leans over to show you something. He's been trying to make a new pair of foot-wrap strips of cloth that go around the feet under boots, since proper socks are a luxury. He's used wool soaked in animal fat to add some waterproofing. It's crude. It's brilliant. You nod approval. He grins. Innovation doesn't need to be pretty. Just less terrible than yesterday. Your needle snaps. You stare at it, sigh, and dig for another. You find one bent and smooth. You file it against the wall. It works. Outside, the wind howls like a thing trying to break in. Snow rattles against the shutters. Someone tightens the rope holding them shut. A gust blows smoke down the chimney, and for a moment the whole house coughs together. Then it clears. You go back to stitching. You finish your mittens. They're hideous, but functional. You move on to your neck, wrap a piece of old cloth with rabbit fur sewn around the edge. The fur is thinning. You try not to think about how little warmth it holds now. Someone pulls out a bundle of dry moss crushed and shaped into insoles. They pass you one raised eyebrow. You nod. Your boots could use it. Anything to stave off the numbness. There's a rhythm to all this. A rhythm of thread and tug of breath and patience. You fall into it. The world becomes smaller. Just the flick of the needle, the pull of wool, the quiet wheeze of someone in the corner, trying not to wake the baby. You glance over at the drying rack. A squirrel pelt hangs there, scraped clean, drying stiff. It'll become something useful. A hat lining, a pouch, maybe a patch for someone's pants. A mouse runs across the beam above you. No one reacts. You think you hear someone mutter, "Morning Herald?" The mouse vanishes. Back at your side, the old woman from before is using plant fiber cord to bind a crack in a wooden bowl. She hums while she works something slow and wordless. Her fingers tremble, but the bowl holds. You help tighten the last knot. The boy with the foot wraps watches, then nods. He's learning. You're all teaching, even when you don't mean to. This is how knowledge travels here, hand-to-hand. Mistake to mistake, warmth to warmth. Outside, the light has barely changed, just a little less gray than before. You hear the voice of the lookout call from the road. Someone's returning with a bundle of firewood, maybe. Or reeds, or just news. You don't look up. You keep sewing. The thread slides through your fingers, the mittens come back together, and the boy beside you starts tying cord around a cracked belt. This is the heart of winter, not the wind, not the snow. The mending, the remaking, the refusal to let anything, object, or person fall apart completely. By nightfall, your fingers will ache. Your back will burn. Your eyes will sting from the smoke. But you'll have mittens. And someone else will have a bowl. And the house will hold one more day. You've made it through another day, and now you're back. Where it always ends, curled into the communal sleep pile, wrapped in whatever layers haven't been turned into rags. Yet pressed between people who smell like stew fire and old wool. But tonight something is different. Your skin itches. Not a little, not the occasional scratch. This is the full-body rebellion of medieval winter hygiene. You shift uncomfortably. Your shirt feels like it's made of sandpaper. You try to scratch without waking the person beside you, but your sleeve is stiff with rancid lard and soot from firebank smoke. You grimace. This is the part they don't tell you in stories. You can survive the cold. You can share warmth. But nothing prepares you for the never-ending itch. You pull your sleeve back and examine the rash starting to form red blotchy-edged. In what might be flea bites or just irritation from coarse homespun wool that's been worn for 43 days straight. Someone beside you shifts and mumbles in their sleep. You lie there trying not to claw yourself apart. Eventually you slip out of the sleep pile moving like a thief. The air is like ice water on your skin. You wince but keep going. You grab a small leather pouch tucked near the fire, untie the strings, and withdraw your last treasures. A handful of dried moss, a pinch of ash, a scrap of soft linen, a sliver of soap root. Your entire medical kit. You sit near the low fire where the coals still burn low and red, and start the ritual of winter cleansing. First you mix the ash with a little melted snow to make a mild scrub. It's rough, unpleasant, but it cuts the grease. Next, the soap root, not enough for bubbles, but just enough to loosen the filth that clings like a second skin. You use the linen scrap to rub the worst patches, armpits, groin, behind the knees. You whisper apologies to yourself with every wince. Someone else joins you, an older man. He doesn't speak. He just settles beside you, dips a rag into the same ash mix, and begins to wash his face. You don't exchange words. In the middle of winter at 2 a.m., silence is sacred. You use the dried moss as a final touch, patting it gently on the rash-prone spots. It soothes more than you expected. Historians still debate whether moss was used for hygiene insulation or wound care. The answer? Probably all of the above. When you have nothing, you try everything. You change into your least awful shirt. The other one you lay out by the fire to dry. Maybe tomorrow it'll be a little less horrifying. Someone sneezes nearby. You glance over. A girl is awake now too, combing through her braid with a bone lice comb, sighing every time she flicks something into the flames. You hand her your pouch. She takes it grateful and offers you a sliver of beeswax in exchange. You chew it slowly, savoring the mild sweetness. It's old, maybe rancid, but it's still sugar, and that's a miracle in itself. You stoke the fire a little. It flares briefly, casting shadows on the walls, revealing the cracks stuffed with straw and dung, sealed by frozen breath and desperation. The heat touches your face, then fades. Behind you, someone has started snoring again. A pig grunts from the corner. You hear the shift of hooves as a goat stands, stretches, then lays back down. You return to the sleep pile cleaner than you were, if not clean. You squeeze back into place, trying not to wake the girl with the bandaged foot beside you. You pull your cloak tight. You sigh. And that's when you realize the itch is gone. Not completely, not forever, but enough. Enough to let you sleep. You close your eyes. And think of warm springs, of clean rivers, of soap that smells like herbs, not smoke, of a world where washing isn't an act of courage. But tonight you're a little more comfortable, a little less broken, a little more human. And that's all winter ever gives you, tiny victories spaced between cold defeats. You take this one, you keep it, and you let yourself drift. The next morning you don't wake to light, you wake to noise. Voices. Feet thudding. A rooster trying and failing to crow because its throat is frozen. Then the sharp crack of something shattering outside a jug of water dropped and turned to shards before it even hit the ground. You sit up fast. The air stabs your lungs. It's colder than usual. A lot colder. Someone yells from the doorway. The river's frozen solid. Now that's bad news. You scramble out of the sleep pile. Your breath fogs like smoke from a chimney. You grab your cloak, shove your arms into it while hopping on one foot to cram on your stiff boots. Everyone's moving now. A low thrum of panic beneath the practical noise. Because a frozen river means no water, no laundry, no cooking, no steam for herbs, you bolt outside, joining the cluster of villagers heading toward the water's edge. The wind slaps your cheeks raw. Your eyes water and freeze in the corners. Your boots crunch through crusted snow that's turned the color of old bone. The river is a white ribbon, utterly still. Solid. Glittering in the pale morning sun like some terrifying gift from the gods. A man stomps on it. Nothing. Another takes a stick and jabs it, then chips away with a hatchet. A small hole appears just enough to collect a trickle of slush, but it's not much. Someone sighs, someone else curses. And that's when Plan B kicks in. Because medieval peasants never have just one plan. They can't afford to. You and 3 others head toward the woods, dragging a sled fashioned from a broken door and rope. The goal: find clean snow. The kind far enough from the barnyard not to smell like goat pee. The kind you can melt and use for stew tea and cleaning wounds. The trees grown above you. Bare, brittle fingers clawing the sky. Every few feet a branch snaps under the weight of snow and crashes to the ground like a warning shot. You find the spot. Untouched snow banked against a mossy boulder. You scrape the top layer off first, always. You know the rules. First layer is wind-borne ash and soot. You want the second layer, the clean stuff. You pile it high onto the sled. It's heavier than it looks, dense, wet, like packing silence into sacks. By the time you drag it back, your legs are shaking and your arms ache. But it's worth it. Inside, someone's already stoked the fire. A blackened pot of water is starting to steam. You dump the snow and watching it hiss and disappear into itself. There's a small pile of pine needles and dried mint on the table. Someone plans to make tea, or at least something that pretends to be tea. You notice the windows have started icing on the inside. You chip at them with a bone-handled knife, letting a little light in before the frost retakes it. The air is so dry it crackles. Your lips are split. Your knuckles, too. You apply a dab of rendered animal fat, softening the skin, just enough to move without bleeding. A woman asks if you've seen her daughter's shoe. You point toward the fire. It's drying on a stick. A boy is trying to thaw out a length of bowstring soaked in beeswax, muttering under his breath about hunting birds. You give him an encouraging pat, then offer him a dried beet from the food cache. He chews it like it's toffee. You look toward the stew pot. It's thin today. No meat, barely broth. You decide it's a feast of the future day. That's what the elders call meals that are mostly hot water and optimism. You laugh at the thought. Quiet, but real. Because if you don't laugh, the cold wins. Historians still argue whether laughter was a defense mechanism or a rebellion during the medieval winter. Maybe both. Someone cracks open a loaf of sour rye bread harder than a cobblestone. You soak your piece in the tea water, chewing slowly. It squeaks between your teeth. Then the cry comes from the road again. Someone's at the edge of the village, a traveler maybe, or a peddler. Everyone moves toward the sound. Visitors in winter are rare and suspicious. You pull your cloak tighter and step into the snow boots crunching over the frost-hardened path. As you approach the figure, they raise a hand in greeting. A bundle slung over their back. Face hidden in layers. You don't recognize them, but they speak the language. They say they've come from a village to the south. One that burned last week. One that didn't make it. You feel your breath catch. They ask to stay, just for a few nights. You exchange glances with the others, then nod. Because no one turns away a survivor in winter. Not unless they want to invite the same fate. You help carry their bundle into the house. It's full of things: dried roots, a matted sheepskin, a cracked icon of St. Cuthbert. You trade stew for stories. And later that night, as the fire dances and the frost creeps down the walls, you listen to how other people survive. To how other people don't. To how every day is borrowed time. And as you wrap yourself in scratchy wool, bury your face in smoke-scented cloth, and feel the slow drift of sleep pull you under once more, you whisper the only prayer winter ever listens to. One more night, and wait for morning. In early medieval Europe, think 500 to 900 CE, bathing wasn't yet forbidden or feared. In fact, monastic orders like the Benedictines mandated scheduled bathing. Priests bathed, pilgrims bathed, Even peasants once a week or so made time to rinse themselves off. You were expected to wash your hands before meals, your feet before bed, and your soul, well, regularly. But back then, water wasn't just about hygiene. It was spiritual. The idea that physical purity and moral purity could coexist was deeply rooted in leftover Roman values. After all, the Romans had public baths in every city, complete with steam rooms, hot and cold plunges, and even saunas. These ideas lingered quietly, glowing like embers in the medieval world's foundation. That's why the first medieval bathhouses were built near monasteries. They weren't places of sin or excess. They were acts of devotion to health, to order, and to cleanliness. Bathing was prayerful, methodical. You might use a strigil, an iron scraper, to remove oil and sweat, or wash with soft linen cloth, soaked in warm water infused with herbs like sage or calendula. And yes, they had soap. Crude, greasy, and often a little suspicious smelling, but it existed. Most of it was made from rendered animal fat mixed with wood ash, forming lye. It worked. Aggressively. Rub it too long and your skin might feel like boiled leather, but still it was better than nothing. Some scholars argue that bathhouses were more widespread than we think, especially in the early period. Excavations across France, England, and the Low Countries reveal stone heating systems, tiled floors, and even carved wooden buckets, suggesting regular use. But not everyone agrees. Was medieval Europe a land of hidden spas? Historians still debate it. Some say yes. Others believe these remnants were rare luxuries for nobles and monks, not the average soul with a goat and 3 turnips to their name. Still, for a few peaceful centuries, the tub was not yet taboo. You could soak beside the hearth without fearing you were inviting death or worse sin. And then the tide turned. A strange mix of plague paranoia and piety began seeping into the medieval worldview. By the 10th century, people started questioning this love affair with hot water. Was it really safe? Did it make the body vulnerable? Could it, heaven forbid, tempt the flesh? You wouldn't know it yet in your cozy bath near the fire, but the days of peaceful scrubbing were numbered. Soon, monks would be told to bathe less. Nobles would begin wrapping themselves in perfumes and excuses. And the warm water you now sit in? That would become a suspect liquid capable of opening not just pores, but portals to disease. But tonight, none of that matters. For now, you're here. Soaking, steaming, listening to the quiet drip of water. Clean not just in body, but in spirit. And as the last of the warmth begins to fade and your fingers wrinkle like prunes, you step carefully out of the tub. 1 foot onto cold stone towel draped around your shoulders, thinking, that wasn't so bad. Tomorrow maybe you'll try the rosemary rinse. You wake the next morning to the sound of church bells and the faint clatter of hooves on cobblestone. Somewhere nearby, a dog is enthusiastically barking at nothing. You stretch beneath woolen blankets and catch a whiff of something, both sweet and sour remnants of last night's bath, mingling with the unmistakable musk of medieval air. You're not alone, though. Outside your window, a strange kind of revolution is already bubbling. Bathhouses, once a symbol of modest cleanliness, are evolving into something else. Steam, it turns out, attracts more than just dirt. It attracts company. The public bathhouse of the High Middle Ages isn't like your quiet wooden tub near the fire. It's louder, livelier. A place where strangers soak elbow to elbow chatting about grain prices or the latest papal scandal. And depending on the town you're in, that same bathhouse might double as a dining spot or something much more scandalous. These weren't secret brothels tucked in shadowed corners. They were at first communal gathering spots. In cities like Paris, Cologne, and Bath, they were called stews not because of the smell, though that wouldn't be entirely wrong, but from the old French word estuaire, meaning to bathe in steam. At first glance, it's all very civilized. Wooden tubs line the room, each large enough for 2 or 3. Candles flicker along stone walls, water bubbles in iron cauldrons, and outside the bathhouse owner is delivering herbal bundles to the firekeeper, lavender, marjoram, and perhaps a pinch of rosemary. For scent, for superstition. You dip into the water and notice that some of the other bathers are, well, a little too friendly. There's laughter, a splash, a suggestive raise of the eyebrow, and suddenly it hits you. These bathhouses aren't just for getting clean anymore, they're for getting close. This is where things get steamy, both literally and socially. By the 13th and 14th centuries, bathhouses in many towns became known for mixing business with pleasure. Some served food and drink, others offered music or massage, and a few developed reputations that would make even the most tolerant abbot blush. Think of them as medieval spas with foot rubs and flute players and perhaps a not-so-subtle wink. Monks still came to bathe, of course. So did traveling merchants, young couples, widows, and nobles in disguise. It was a public affair, a bubbling, splashing cross-section of society. Cleanliness met camaraderie, bathing met banter, and morality. Well, it wavered like steam over hot stone. Historians still debate just how scandalous these places were. Some records describe stews as wholesome and medicinal. Others detail fines, arrests, and stern sermons warning of bathhouse mischief. In Nuremberg, public bathhouses were required to hang a sign listing acceptable behaviors, and no, acceptable did not include flirting behind the barrels. Even so, bathhouses flourished. There were hundreds across Europe. Cities competed for the most luxurious with tiled floors, stained glass windows, and clever heating systems that ran underfoot. In some towns, mixed gender bathing was the norm, especially in southern regions like Italy and Germany. The belief was that the steam purified more than skin, it purified the soul. Or at least that was the defense offered to bishops and busybodies. But this steam-fueled golden age didn't last. A chill was creeping in. Not from weather, but from whispers. The plague was coming. And with it a growing belief that heat, moisture, and nakedness were dangerous invitations not to temptation but to disease. Some people still soaked. Others started to question it. But as the bathhouse doors began to creak shut, replaced by silence and suspicion, an era faded. For now you're still there in that warm, echoing room. Someone pours you a cup of hot wine. Someone else plays a lute by the fire. The air is scented with fennel and thyme. You lean back into the water, unsure if you're getting cleaner or just more interesting. The next time you reach for a bath, things feel different. You notice it first in the way people speak quiet, careful, as if even discussing bathing might summon something unwanted. Then it shows up in church sermons. Words like modesty, discipline, and sin begin creeping into public discourse, but not about money or pride. About washing. The church has decided it's time to talk about bathing, and not favorably. You see, for centuries, the church had a complicated relationship with hygiene. Cleanliness, after all, was next to godliness, or at least adjacent to it in a polite sort of way. Monasteries once promoted regular washing. Saints were depicted with shining skin, often glowing with both health and holiness. But as fears around sin and disease escalated, something began to shift. Suddenly, the act of disrobing, even in private, was morally questionable. Hot water considered a stimulant to the flesh, and public bathhouses open invitations to carnal mischief. You hear it first from the pulpit. The devil thrives in warmth and nakedness. It's said calmly, gently, but it sticks. And just like that, water becomes suspect. A bishop in England preaches that frequent bathing weakens the spirit. In France, nuns are advised to avoid hot baths altogether, unless they are gravely ill, and even then with supervision. In some areas, bathing more than once a month becomes a kind of vanity. The saints, after all, endured dirt with grace. Shouldn't you? This isn't universal, of course. Some clerics still bathe. Some nobles continue their herbal rinses in private. But public pressure mounts. The church doesn't ban water, but it makes getting clean spiritually inconvenient. And then, as if to seal the argument, nature adds fuel to the fire. The Black Death arrives. Cities panic. People die in the thousands. And though no one yet understands germ theory, there's a theory everyone seems to agree on. Open pores invite death. Hot water softens the body. Steam makes you vulnerable. Bathing, especially in public, is no longer just morally ambiguous. It's potentially fatal. Scholars still argue whether the church used the plague as an excuse to ban bathhouses, or whether fear of contagion truly drove the closures. Some say it was both. Others believe the bathhouses were already morally compromised. This just sealed their fate. Whatever the cause, you feel the change everywhere. A once bustling bathhouse now sits boarded and silent. Ivy creeps up the walls. The smell of damp wood lingers. Even the herbalists nearby stop selling their bath sachets. You visit a monastery and notice that the bath schedule is gone. Where there were once warm stones and rinsing benches, there are only scrolls and candle stubs. One monk whispers that bathing is still allowed on Easter or if you've been very, very ill. But for everyone else, dry skin is safer skin. Now, if you're wealthy, you adapt. You build small private tubs. You heat your own water. You invent rituals of cleanliness that don't look like bathing at all. Perfumed cloths, vinegar rinses, spiced powders tucked into sleeves and bodices. If you're poor, you simply stop bathing. Not because you enjoy the grime, but because fear, deep, persistent fear, has convinced you that to soak is to risk your soul. And your lungs. You scratch behind your ear and try not to think about it. You dab your forehead with a rose-scented rag and pretend it's enough. And you tell yourself that the saints didn't bathe either, which may or may not have been true. So you skip the bath just this once. Maybe you dab behind your ears with lavender water. Maybe you run a cloth down your arms, careful not to disturb the layers of dust ash and time clinging to your skin. You tell yourself it's fine. Everyone smells like this. Everyone itches like this. Everyone survives like this. Still, something feels off. You're not dirty exactly, but you're not clean either. You're something in between. And so you go looking for soap. Now let's be clear, medieval soap is not luxurious. It doesn't come in bright colors or fancy shapes. It doesn't smell like coconut milk or fresh linen. Medieval soap is a brute, a gritty grayish brick that bites before it sues. But it's here. It exists. It works technically. In Northern Europe, soap is most often made from animal fat and wood ash. You render the fat until it becomes liquid, then mix it with lye made by leaching rainwater through hardwood ashes. The result: a dense caustic block that strips away oil dirt and possibly your dignity. And you use it because the alternative is worse. In southern regions, things are slightly better. In Muslim Spain, Castile soap begins to make the rounds. This soap is made from olive oil, not animal fat, and it's smoother, more fragrant, and kinder to your skin. It lathers, sort of. It softens marginally. And it smells faintly of rosemary and lemons if you're lucky. The nobility love it. The middle class covets it. The poor probably can't afford it. So you go back to the fat and ash blend. Maybe you add a little lavender. Maybe you heat it before scrubbing. Maybe it still smells like mutton. Soap becomes currency in some towns. It's given as gifts sold by weight and guarded like treasure. And yet it's never quite enough. It doesn't fix everything. It doesn't make the bathhouses return or the sermons stop. It just takes the edge off. Scholars still argue whether medieval people used soap daily. Some suggest it was mostly for laundry, not skin. Others claim regular use among tradespeople, especially tanners and blacksmiths. There's even evidence of soap-making guilds in places like Marseille and Bristol, showing that this was a serious business with recipes passed down like secret spells. You visit a village market and spot the soap merchant. Leathery hands, soot-stained apron, a wagon full of hard, misshapen bars. He offers you a small one for a halfpenny. You hesitate. That's the cost of a meal, but you buy it anyway. That night you sit by the fire, wet a cloth, and rub the soap into your arms. It stings immediately. Your skin goes red. You smell vaguely of pork and ash. But there's something satisfying about it. A kind of medieval exfoliation. The next morning you feel lighter. Not cleaner exactly, but less grimy. Less haunted by the weight of unwashed days. For a brief moment you understand the appeal. Not just of soap, but of the act. The ritual of cleaning. The private rebellion of washing yourself even when the world says not to. And as the bar shrinks wash by painful wash, you begin to treasure it. Not for how well it works, but for what it means. That in a time of filth and fear, you still care. Your precious soap sits on a cloth near the hearth, now drying between uses like a sacred stone. But you begin to realize that washing your body is only half the battle. The next challenge is what to wash in. You step into a wealthy home, a manor house of timber and thatch, where the fireplace roars and shadows cling to the beams. In the corner, 2 servants are hauling pails of hot water. They pour it slowly into a large wooden tub, lined with linen and perfumed with rosemary. This, you're told, is the bath of the lady of the house. She'll soak tonight with a touch of luxury. Perhaps some meadowsweet or rose petals. Maybe warm wine poured over her scalp. She'll dry off with woven linen and perfume herself with imported oil. But she'll only do this once, maybe twice a season. Because even here in the home of the well-off, bathing is ceremonial, not routine. You look beyond the manor to the cottages. small homes of packed earth and low ceilings. Here a bath is improvised, a barrel, a bucket, a basin. Sometimes it's just a wet rag by candlelight. Water must be fetched from the well heated over fire and poured by hand. No plumbing, no privacy, just steam splinters and effort. Baths happen rarely, and when they do, it's often a family event. One person bathes, then the next, using the same water. The eldest first, the youngest last. If you've ever heard the phrase, "don't throw the baby out with the bathwater," this is where it comes from. Because by the end, the water is no longer clear. You try a bath for yourself. It's a barrel beside a hearth, the water faintly brown with herbs and soot. You sit awkwardly, knees bent, toes cold. There's no candlelit ambiance here. Just the steady drip of condensation and the occasional creak of the house settling. Still, there's peace in it. The warmth seeps into your bones. The scent of lavender from your leftover soap clings to your arms. You're not at a spa. You're not even alone. But in this quiet moment surrounded by smoke and steam, you feel something like comfort. And it's not just nobles and peasants taking baths. You hear stories of midwives boiling water for birthing mothers, of soldiers scrubbing before feast days. Even prisoners in some cities were given a bath before their execution as a final act of mercy. Baths were not extinct. They were just rare, hard-won, sometimes whispered about. Historians debate how frequent these baths were. Some say peasants never washed. Others insist they bathed seasonally, especially before Easter or major festivals. In some German towns, there were public bathhouses for the poor, subsidized by guilds or charities. In others, they were banned outright. Geography mattered. So did weather. So did fear. But everywhere you find the same thing, the effort mattered more than the result. You meet a farmer who hasn't bathed in 3 weeks but changes his linen shirt every few days. You speak to a shepherdess who rubs her feet with mint before bed. You pass a carpenter's wife drying her hair by the fire, combing it carefully with a bone comb dipped in vinegar. You realize hygiene isn't just about being clean, it's about being human. Even in a world where water could kill you, where heat invited judgment, and where privacy was a luxury, people still tried. They still rinsed, scrubbed, combed, dusted. They still sought comfort in rituals, however small. And as you wrap yourself in a cloak and step outside the cold night air biting at your still damp skin, you understand why. Because to be clean in a time when it was almost impossible was to claim a small victory against dirt, against decay, against time itself. The next morning you pull on a freshly laundered linen shirt. It's stiff from drying near the fire, but it smells faintly of wood smoke and thyme. Not exactly luxurious, but compared to yesterday's damp wool, it feels like armor. In the medieval world, clean clothes meant more than a clean body. When daily baths were impractical or discouraged, it was your undergarments that bore the burden. And nothing mattered more than linen. Linen was the unsung hero of medieval hygiene. It was breathable, durable, and absorbent. You wore it close to the skin, a long shirt, or a shift that soaked up sweat body oils and anything else life threw at you. Outer layers, woolen tunics, cloaks, gowns might go months without washing. But linen that got laundered. And it got laundered hard. You pass through a village and hear at first the slap-slap of wet fabric being beaten against a flat stone. Down by the river, a woman is scrubbing a shirt with such force it could double as an exorcism. Another rinses linens in a tub of water darkened by lye and not the store-bought kind. This lye is homemade from wood ash soaked in rainwater, strong enough to peel skin off your knuckles. Some washerwomen use herbs marjoram for scent nettles for their astringent bite. Others swear by urine aged and fermented to become ammoniated and highly effective for breaking down stains. You wrinkle your nose but admit the shirt does come out cleaner. Laundry day is serious business. It's loud, physical, communal. You join in half-heartedly scrubbing your own shift while pretending not to watch the more experienced women beat collars into submission. There's gossip, singing, sometimes arguing, but always the rhythm of labor. And then the drying. Clothes are hung on bushes draped over wooden frames or even laid on thatched roofs. The sun does the rest. You notice that children are often the ones tasked with turning shirts to dry, evenly small hands flipping linen like pages in a book. Back home, you pull the shirt over your head and feel instantly improved. You didn't bathe today or yesterday, but the shirt is clean and that makes you clean. By medieval standards, at least. Monks wrote about this. Nobles boasted about it. Even peasants understood the logic. If you changed your linen often enough and kept your hair and hands in good order, you could pass as virtuous, maybe even saintly. Linen in this world was more than fabric. It was protection. From lice, from infection, from judgment. Historians still debate how often linen was laundered. Some claim weekly, others say monthly, depending on the weather and water supply. But across Europe, from Italian cities to English farms, you find the same pattern. Linen was a symbol of effort. The white shift beneath your tunic told the world you cared, that you hadn't given in to filth or fate. It's even in art. Paintings and manuscripts often show saints and nobles in gleaming linen robes, bright against darker backgrounds. It wasn't just for aesthetics. It was a visual shorthand for purity, for order, for grace under very sweaty pressure. And so, even without soap, without steam, without a warm bath, you find your hygiene in layers. In the crisp fold of a sleeve, in the freshly beaten collar of your shirt, in the scratchy comfort of fabric that still holds the scent of river water and wood smoke. You walk through the village a little taller, your shift rustling beneath your clothes, invisible but powerful. No one says anything, but you see it in their eyes. You're tidy, composed, respectable. Tomorrow, maybe you'll wear the other one. You're walking through a crowded medieval street now, the kind where everyone seems to know your business, and no one is using their indoor voice. The air is thick, not just with voices, but with scent. Clove, sweat, boiled cabbage, damp wool, and something else more mysterious, a swirl of crushed herbs and floral oils trailing behind a passing noble. You're learning that in the absence of baths, people turn to a different kind of defense perfume herbs and aromatic improvisation. You duck into a small apothecary, dimly lit and stuffed wall to wall with bundles of dried lavender, thyme, and marjoram. A woman behind the counter is wrapping tiny sachets in cloth sleep pillows, some call them. Others tuck them into sleeves, belts, and bodices. You buy one and slip it into your cloak. Within minutes, you smell less like boiled onion and more like a tired forest fairy. It's an improvement. Scent wasn't just cosmetic. People believed it had protective powers, that good smells could fight off bad humors, the invisible forces thought to cause disease. Doctors wore bird-beaked masks stuffed with strong-smelling herbs to shield them from plague. Noble women crushed violet petals into vinegar to make sweet waters used to dab wrists, foreheads, and linens. Herbalists sold little cloth balls called pomanders filled with cinnamon sage or even ambergris. Yes, the waxy substance from a whale's digestive tract worth a fortune for its lingering scent. You try your hand at a vinegar rinse. The recipe: red wine vinegar, dried rose petals, a pinch of sage, and a secret prayer. You soak a cloth and gently wipe your face and neck. It tingles. You're not clean in the way you'd like to be, but your skin smells like salad dressing at a royal banquet. Even garlic was used as a kind of protective scent. Some believed wearing garlic around the neck or even rubbing it into shoes could keep away illness. The logic, if it repelled friends and family, surely it would scare off the plague. Historians still debate how widely these practices were used. Some suggest that aromatic defense was limited to the upper classes who could afford imported oils and rare herbs. Others argue that every class had their version, simple rosemary branches for the poor, expensive frankincense for the rich. You pass a group of pilgrims on the road. One wears a necklace of dried orange peels and cloves. Another chews a sprig of mint like it's divine protection. They haven't bathed in weeks, but the scent wafting off them is tolerable. You also notice certain public places trying their best. Churches burn incense not just for holiness, but for odor control. Nobles sprinkle rushes aromatic straw on their floors, sometimes mixed with crushed juniper or chamomile. It doesn't remove the dirt, but it does cover the scent. A side note, rushes are notoriously deceptive. They look clean, smell pleasant, and hide layers of dropped food hair and small bones underneath. It's like sweeping all your mess under a fragrant rug. But still, it's better than nothing. You return home and gather your own bundle of dried herbs. You place them in a cloth pouch, tie it with a bit of string, and hang it near your bed. It's not a bath, it's not soap. But it's something, a statement, a resistance. Because even in a world where water is suspect and hot baths are sinful, people still chase comfort in scent and softness and the faint smell of lavender clinging to linen. You breathe it in before you sleep. And for the first time in days, your dreams smell sweet. You wake up with a plan. No bath, no full-body scrub, but today is a hair day. Hair, after all, is both a statement and a struggle in the medieval world. And keeping it clean? That's a feat worthy of sainthood. You start by reaching for your comb, a narrow thing carved from bone or horn. It's not delicate, it's not kind, but it's necessary. You run it slowly through your hair, wincing each time it catches on a tangle or something. Moving. Lice, possibly. But we'll deal with that later. Hair care in medieval times was serious business. Everyone, rich or poor, did something to maintain it. Because dirty clothes you could hide beneath layers. Dirty hair that was front and center. You watch a noblewoman across the courtyard. Her maid is washing her hair with eggs, not metaphorically, but literally. One after another, yolks and whites are cracked into a bowl and whisked to frothy yellow foam. Then poured over her head with gentle fingers and a prayer that it won't attract birds. Eggs, it turns out, are one of many homemade shampoos. Others used vinegar beer or even rainwater steeped in nettles. The goal wasn't always to clean, it was to condition, to tame, to mask whatever was lurking beneath the braid. You try the beer method. It smells strange, foams a little, and stings when it hits your eyes, but your hair shines afterwards, slightly sticky, slightly herbal, like a pub that's been blessed. Fire is also involved. Not directly, thank goodness, but as a threat. In many homes, women dried their hair near open hearths, often seated on low stools, their long locks fanned out to absorb the warmth. It sounds romantic. It's not. A single spark and you're suddenly the candle. To protect hair from grime, people covered it constantly. Coifs, veils, caps, hats. Everyone wore something. It kept dust out, lice in, and morality intact. A woman with her hair uncovered in public might be seen as immodest, even scandalous. A man with unkempt hair, possibly drunk, possibly cursed. You see a priest combing his beard with slow, careful strokes. Nearby, a merchant rubs rosemary oil into his scalp. You pass a group of washerwomen, their hair tied in tight knots, secured with bone pins. No one's washing their hair every day, but everyone is doing something. And lice. Lice were not just a nuisance. They were a fact of life. Combs were designed with fine teeth for a reason. People shared remedies like powdered iris root garlic oil or wearing certain stones tied to their foreheads. Boiling clothes helped. So did shaving your head, which many monks did as part of their vows, though the hygiene benefit was a convenient bonus. Historians still argue about frequency. Did people wash their hair monthly? Seasonally? Was it more common among the nobility who had servants to help with rinsing and drying? Or was it simply a matter of opportunity whenever the weather and water supply aligned? You suspect it was all of the above. Because while some people wore hair like a crown, others treated it like a battlefield. Every braid, every comb stroke, every drop of egg yolk was a tiny war against time, dirt, and decay. Tonight your hair is cleanish, softish. You braid it with rosemary twigs and sleep with your head elevated, letting the scent fill your dreams. You don't smell like roses, you don't shine like gold, but you feel human. And in this time, that's more than enough. You stretch before dawn, yawn once, and grimace. Your mouth tastes like old bread soaked in metal. That's your morning reminder dental hygiene in the medieval world is not glamorous. It's not even pleasant. But you can't ignore it forever. You reach for your tooth cleaning tool, a frayed twig. This is your toothbrush now. It's willow or maybe birch chewed at one end until the fibers fan out like a tiny brush. You scrape it along your teeth, tasting wood herbs and something vaguely spicy. Because if you're lucky, the twig's been soaked in mint water or vinegar. Maybe dabbed in a homemade powdered charcoal, crushed seashells, even powdered bone. If you're rich, you might even use burnt rosemary or sage mixed with honey. You spit and look into a polished piece of metal your mirror. There's no toothpaste smile staring back, but your teeth are cleaner than they were yesterday. And that's a win. Surprisingly, many medieval folks cared deeply about their teeth. Clean breath and healthy gums weren't just cosmetic, they were tied to spiritual and social ideas of purity. And let's be honest, no one wanted to get that close to a bishop with breath that could kill a goose. In fact, physicians wrote detailed instructions about oral care. Clean your teeth with a cloth or twig after meals. Rinse with wine or vinegar. Rub gums with salt. And chew spices not just for flavor but for fragrance. Cloves, fennel seeds. Cinnamon bark like a medieval chewing gum, but crunchier and slightly terrifying. You visit a monastery and notice a basket of toothpicks carved wooden ones neatly stacked. Monks are expected to keep themselves tidy, even their teeth, especially their teeth. A noblewoman shows you her dental kit, a silver tongue scraper, a tiny jar of mint powder, and a bronze mirror. You nod politely while secretly calculating the cost equal to a month's worth of bread easily. Of course, not everyone could afford that, but even common folk did what they could. You walk past a baker chewing on licorice root between sales. A shepherd plucks wild sage from a hedge and rubs it across his gums. A child dips a clean cloth in vinegar and wipes his teeth while singing a rhyme about dragons and garlic. Historians still argue how effective these methods were. Archaeological remains show that many medieval people had surprisingly healthy teeth. Far less sugar in the diet meant fewer cavities. But gum disease rampant, abscesses common, and tooth loss almost inevitable by age 40. Dentistry wasn't exactly advanced. If you had a bad tooth, you pulled it. No anesthetic. Just prayer, a strong assistant, and maybe a bit of alcohol if you were lucky. Traveling barbers often doubled as tooth pullers. You'll recognize them by their stained aprons and impressive grip strength. One barber shows you his pliers. They're rusted and slightly bent. He claims they've never failed to yank a molar on the first try. You nod and back away slowly. But prevention that was within reach. Chew the twig. Rinse with herbs. Avoid sweets if you can. And above all, stay consistent. So tonight you sit by the fire chewing on fennel and scrubbing your teeth with your trusty twig. You're not minty fresh. Your gums still ache a little. But you've done your part. Tomorrow, you'll do it again. Because in a world without toothpaste commercials or electric toothbrushes, routine is your best defense. You smile into the firelight, your teeth slightly gray, slightly crooked, but fully yours. Tonight, you're not sleeping in your own bed. You're traveling, which means you're spending the night in an inn. Or worse, a stranger's home invited in out of obligation or kindness. Either way, your hygiene expectations have been significantly lowered. The room is cramped, the straw mattress lumpy, and the smell, let's call it layered. A mix of animal damp cloth feet and boiled onions. You've stayed in worse places, but not by much. And now you face a new medieval hygiene challenge: communal sleeping arrangements. You're not alone in the bed. 2 other travelers lie beside you, already snoring. You each have your own blanket, but you're definitely brushing knees. This isn't scandalous, it's survival. Beds were expensive, heat was precious. So unless you were royalty sharing was the norm. You lie there stiffly, your breath fogging the air, and try to focus on something pleasant. Maybe the faint scent of rosemary from your travel sachet. Maybe the fact that at least no one has lice. Yet, you shift a little and hear something crunch under the straw. You choose not to investigate. In the morning, your back aches. You stretch, shiver, and stumble outside to relieve yourself, which means you're heading toward the nearest something. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: toilets in the medieval world were as varied as they were questionable. In towns, you might find a public latrine, a long bench with holes over a pit. Functional, cold, very public. Wealthy homes might have a garderobe, a stone seat built into the castle wall, where waste dropped into a chute and hopefully into a moat. Monasteries had long rows of seats over running water. Fancy. But most people used a bucket, or a field, or a designated corner. You find yourself in a small courtyard where the host has thoughtfully provided a wooden bench with a hole cut into it. Beneath, a pot. Next to it, a scoop of ash. No paper, no cloth. Just moss and scrap linen, reused until it wasn't. Some households kept rags on a stick for group use. You try not to think about it too hard. And when the pot is full, someone, usually the youngest child or a servant, empties it outside the city walls or into the street gutter. In many towns, this was scheduled with designated waste collectors known as gong farmers. Their job was dangerous, smelly, and surprisingly well paid, mostly because no one else wanted it. You hear a cart roll past filled with waste barrels. The man steering it whistles cheerfully. You salute him because honestly, he's a sanitation hero. Historians still debate how organized sanitation was. Some towns, especially in Islamic Spain or parts of Italy, had remarkably advanced sewer systems. Others relied on ditches, gutters, and good intentions. Public fines for dumping waste in the street existed, but enforcement was uneven. You return to the inn and wash your hands in a bowl of tepid water that's seen too many hands already. You dry them on your cloak. You mutter a prayer to any saint who'll listen. Because in this time, staying clean is a full-time job. And travel turns hygiene into a game of improvisation luck and lower expectations. But you manage. You keep your soap wrapped in cloth. You hang your linen shirt to air. You chew on mint and pretend the bedbugs are just very affectionate fleas. And as night falls again and your new bedmate snores with frightening enthusiasm, you pull the blanket to your chin and whisper to yourself, "Tomorrow I'm bathing in a stream, even if it kills me." You're not bathing in a stream today. You're walking down a city street trying not to gag. Because hygiene in medieval towns wasn't just about your personal habits, it was about what surrounded you. And right now, what surrounds you is, let's say, aromatic. You dodge a puddle brown, mysterious, definitely alive. You sidestep a half-rotted cabbage. Overhead, a window creaks open and a bucket tilts. You already know what's coming. Someone shouts Gardez-vous, a corrupted French warning, meaning, watch out for the water, and you jump back just in time to avoid being splashed by a slosh of human waste. It hits the cobblestone with a sound you can't unhear. This is daily life in many medieval cities. There are no sewers as you know them. Waste flows through open gutters called kennels that run down the middle of the street. Rain helps flush it along. In dry weather, it just sits and simmers. You walk past a row of fishmongers. The air smells like brine and regret. Further down, a butcher's stall spills blood and offal into the gutter. Pigs wander freely, gobbling scraps and contributing generously to the mess. A child with bare feet skips between them, giggling. You try not to scream. Yet somehow this is normal. Cities are hubs of trade power and culture and also petri dishes for everything unwashed. But don't be too harsh. People tried. Some streets had designated cleaners. Merchants swept their stalls. In wealthier districts, residents paid to have filth carts haul away waste. There were even laws. In London, it was illegal to throw refuse into the street without a permit. In Paris, butchers had to dispose of entrails beyond the walls. Fines existed. So did complaints. But enforcement spotty. Still, not every town was a disaster. You visit Lübeck, a northern city with strict sanitation codes. Gutters are deeper. Privies are emptied more often. In Islamic Cordoba, you marvel at tiled streets and underground drains. And in some parts of Rome, ancient Roman aqueducts still provide running water, yes, centuries later. But for most towns, the stench is just part of life. You learn to breathe through your mouth. You hold a scented cloth to your face like the nobility once did. Some even carry pomanders, tiny metal orbs filled with clove rose or ambergris. It helps. Barely. You stop by a public fountain. These are common in many towns supplied by cisterns or aqueducts. People gather to fetch water, wash hands, rinse clothes. A baker splashes his face. A nun scrubs a pot. A boy fills a jug, then promptly knocks it over. You refill your own flask, grateful for the cool, clear stream. You don't think about where it comes from, or where it might go after. Historians still argue how effective medieval sanitation really was. Some claim city life was apocalyptic, disease-ridden, and festering. Others point to efforts at cleanliness laws, punishments, even street washing during festivals. The truth as always lies somewhere in between. Because even in filth, people tried to create order. They swept, they drained, they adapted. They kept goats for garbage control. They trained dogs to follow waste carts. They burned sweet-smelling herbs in public squares. And you survive it all. You sidestep the worst puddles. You avoid walking near windows. You time your market visits to beat the fish smell. You even invent a game, Guess That Odor. You always lose. And as the sun sets behind the city walls, you take refuge in a courtyard cleaner, quieter, and paved with stone. You sit near a patch of herbs, lemon balm, mint, and basil. You breathe in, and for a moment the city doesn't stink. The next day you're walking along the outer wall of a crumbling old castle, the kind where ivy climbs the stones like gossip and wind whistles through arrow slits. The place is cold, damp, and elegant in a drafty kind of way. You're not here for the view. You're here because someone told you the garderobe is still intact. Yes, the medieval castle toilet. You follow a narrow hallway that juts out over the edge of the wall. At the very end is a wooden seat with a hole in the middle like an outhouse, but suspended 40 feet in the air. Below, a moat. Or if the castle's old enough, just open earth, lucky grass, and regret. This is the garderobe, the wardrobe of waste. Why the name? Some say nobles hung their clothes there, believing the ammonia fumes would kill lice. Others argue the term evolved from older Latin roots losing its dignity along the way. You step up carefully. The wind whistles through the chute. You suddenly understand why people use chamber pots at night instead. In the countryside, things are simpler. A hole in the ground, a bit of moss, maybe a flat stone if you're fancy. Some homes have outhouses, a wooden seat over a pit moved every few months when the pit fills up. Not ideal, but it works. For toilet paper, forget it. You get moss if you're lucky. Straw is common. Old cloth even more so, especially scraps of worn-out undergarments. In colder regions, snowballs were apparently favored for a brisk, shocking cleanse. In communal settings, there might be a sponge on a stick soaked in vinegar and shared among users. Yes, shared. Let that sink in. But wait, it gets better. You come across a Roman ruin during your travels. Incredibly, the latrines are still there. Rows of stone seats with flowing water beneath. A sponge cleaning trough beside them. These weren't just toilets, they were social spaces. Romans chatted, argued, and conducted business while relieving themselves. You sigh, standing in a medieval field holding a wooden shovel and a bit of moss. Historians still debate how widespread these advanced toilets were. Some claim Roman sanitation was centuries ahead. Others argue that medieval people maintained similar hygiene in smaller, less glamorous ways. One thing's for certain, the ancient world wiped smarter. Back in the castle, a servant shows you the cleaning schedule. The garderobes must be scraped weekly, lime sprinkled down the chute, ash poured to keep the smell tolerable. Rats discouraged with dogs and prayer. Later, in a small village, you meet a woman who proudly shows you her indoor bench with a pot beneath. She empties it every morning behind the hedgerow. Her neighbors nod approvingly. It's a tidy system. You start to see the logic. Privacy is rare. Comfort is optional. But efficiency, that's where people innovate. And so, that evening when nature calls, you take your moss bundle, your dignity, and a small candle, and step outside to do what medieval folk have done for centuries. With a little ingenuity, a little patience, and very low expectations. It's cold tonight, the kind of cold that seeps through your boots and settles in your bones. So you're doing what many medieval people did to survive. You're huddled close to someone else, and probably something else too. Yes, tonight you're sleeping with the animals. Not metaphorically, literally. You're in a small peasant cottage, one room, shared by everyone: humans, chickens, the occasional goat, and a large sleepy pig named Matilda. She's warm. She smells faintly of straw and turnips. You've smelled worse. This isn't a punishment. It's a strategy. Because while castles had stone walls and rich folk had tapestries, the poor had something better: body heat. And animals, bless them, were nature's hot water bottles. You tuck yourself into a straw mattress lined with old linen. There's no sheet. No pillow. But the pig is already sighing contentedly beside you, and the warmth is mutual. In winter, this kind of arrangement could mean the difference between a cold nap and a slow freeze. The fire has been banked, a method called fire banking, where you smother the flames with ash before bed, preserving the embers until morning. No matches, no lighters. Just careful planning and a whole lot of trust in glowing coals. There's smoke in the air, always. It curls along the ceiling beams and seeps into every piece of cloth. People in the Middle Ages didn't mind it much. It kept the bugs away. But it's also why everyone had a permanent bonfire smell. You cough. The baby next to you stirs. The chickens don't notice. In this tight shared space, hygiene is negotiated. You keep a pot under the bed for emergencies. You wipe your hands on your tunic again. You tuck herbs into the straw to keep lice at bay. And you try not to think too hard about the sounds your neighbors are making in their sleep. Yet in the strangest way, it's comforting. There's a rhythm to it. Someone stokes the coals. Someone coughs. A goat bleats in its dreams. You're all here alive, surviving another night. You think of the noble with her perfumed sheets and scented combs. She may sleep alone, but she's colder, lonelier, and statistically speaking, less likely to survive the winter, because in this time, togetherness was hygiene. It meant warmth, shared chores, shared meals, shared knowledge like which herbs repel lice best pennyroyal, how to trap fleas in a candle saucer, or how to layer linen under wool to wick away sweat. Historians still argue whether peasants were filthy or just realistic. The archaeological record shows plenty of combs, clean linen fragments, and fire pits meticulously maintained. Some even had soap, though not the fancy olive kind. Just lard and ash rough and ready. You wake before dawn to the soft snuffling of Matilda and the creak of boots by the door. Someone's stepping outside to use the hedge. You follow tiptoeing past the sleeping family, past the coals, past the laundry, drying on a line across the room. Outside the frost bites, but the stars are bright. You breathe in the smoky air, wipe your nose on your sleeve, and think strangely that you feel cleaner than you did in the castle. Not cleaner in the modern sense, but cleaner in a medieval sense, warm, alive, dry, and unburdened by expectations. You scratch your head and smile. The rosemary sachet is still tucked into your tunic. You might survive this winter after all. By now you've picked up a rhythm. A scrub here, a rinse there, a vinegar rub when you're feeling fancy. Your clothes have been beaten against rocks, your hair has seen more herbs than a soup pot, and your shoes are permanently damp. You've stopped aiming for clean exactly, you're shooting for functional. Survivable. Socially acceptable. Socially. And that brings us to your final daily ritual, the hands. Hands in medieval life do everything. You eat with them, work with them, pray with them, swat flies with them, and often wipe things that you'd rather not discuss. So keeping them in good order is a small act of resistance against total grime. This morning you start with a bowl of warm water. It's murky from reuse, but it's better than nothing. You rub your fingers together, scrub beneath your nails with a sliver of bone, and then yes, dab on a bit of vinegar for scent and sanity. Soap, if you have any, is reserved for the dirtiest jobs. But ash works in a pinch, as does sand. You've seen blacksmiths do it, even priests. It scrapes away, grime exfoliates, and leaves you with slightly raw but remarkably clean palms. In wealthier homes, the ritual of hand washing is elevated to ceremony. A servant pours scented water over your hands before meals, often from an elegant ewer into a copper basin. Towels are bleached white and embroidered. Guests are impressed. Hands are inspected. It's theater, with rosemary. At monasteries, it's practical. Monks wash before prayers, before meals, after chamber duties. You visit one and watch the process, silent, efficient, almost reverent. It's not about the hands, it's about the soul. And then there's the street. You see a butcher rinse his hands in rainwater collected in a barrel. A baker rubs his palms with flour to clean them. A child wipes his fingers on a dog. You hope it was his dog. People tried. You see that now? They were working with what they had: no tap water, no soap dispensers, no Clorox wipes. Just ash herbs and a fierce determination not to be entirely disgusting. Historians argue about how often people clean their hands. The elite surely more often, if only for show, but in trades that involved food or skin or blood washing was essential. Surgeons used wine or vinegar to rinse their tools. Midwives cleaned their hands before delivering babies. Bakers swore that clean hands made better bread. You wonder if it's all mental. Does scrubbing with wine actually kill anything? Maybe, maybe not. But it feels like it does. And in a time when faith was science and sensation was proof, feeling clean mattered as much as being clean. So tonight you pour water from your flask into a chipped bowl. You scrub, you scrape, you dry on the edge of your cloak. Your hands aren't soft, but they're ready. For whatever comes next, milking, mending, eating, writing. And you realize something: hygiene in this world isn't a luxury. It's a quiet rebellion. A way to say I matter, I endure. I will not let the dirt take me just yet. You tuck the bowl away, stretch out by the fire, and rub rosemary oil into your cracked knuckles. The scent lifts green and sharp against the chill. Your hands are clean enough, your soul just a little lighter. You wake to the sound of bells, church bells, deep and slow, marking the passage of time as they always have. You've spent days immersed in the world of medieval hygiene, and now, as you stretch and yawn beneath your scratchy wool blanket, you begin to realize something strange. You've adjusted. The grime, the rituals, the endless cycle of soapless scrubbing. It's not charming exactly, but it makes sense now. You've learned how people kept themselves together, body and mind, in a world that offered little help and plenty of mess. And on this final day, you find yourself walking into the heart of something rare and remarkable. A medieval public bathhouse. Yes, they existed. You step inside, breath catching at the steam rising through slatted ceilings. A low hum of voices echoes in the tile-lined room. The heat is wet clinging. Candles flicker in alcoves. Buckets clank. Someone's humming. This isn't just bathing, it's a ritual, a community, a statement. In places like Paris, Florence, and London, bathhouses were once everywhere, sometimes dozens per city. Men and women bathed separately except when they didn't. You see a walled-off section curtained for privacy, but mostly people bathe openly. Naked. Social. Scrubbed by attendants with coarse cloths and buckets of hot water. You hesitate, then step into the warmth. You're handed a wooden ladle and told to rinse first, then soak. There's soap, real soap made of animal fat and wood ash. Sharp-smelling. Slick. Effective. You wash your arms, your neck, your face. You even dare to rinse your feet, long hidden in stiff leather boots in unspoken shame. The water is dark now, but you don't care. You feel human again. And here's the twist, bathhouses weren't only for nobles. Everyone used them. For centuries, these places were affordable, accessible, and shockingly modern. Until, of course, they weren't. Because just as you're beginning to enjoy yourself, history knocks on the steamy wooden door. Plague, church pressure, shifting medical theory. Suddenly, bathhouses are viewed with suspicion. Steam and sweat become breeding grounds for sin and sickness. The same places that once promised health are now condemned for spreading disease or worse, immoral thoughts. Historians still debate the timeline. Some say bathhouses declined rapidly after the Black Death. Others argue they lingered quietly in cities and border towns for centuries, especially in Islamic Spain and parts of Eastern Europe. In some places, they never disappeared. In others, they transformed into private baths or spiritual cleansings. You dry off with a rough linen towel and step outside into the night. Your skin prickles in the cool air. You smell like herbs and ash and water. It's not perfume, but it's honest. You look up at the stars. And now, with all that you've seen and lived, you understand medieval hygiene not as a failure, but as a series of triumphs in a hostile world. These people were working with no running water, no disinfectant, no germ theory, no privilege of distance between themselves and dirt. And yet, they adapted. They scrubbed with ashes, rinsed with wine, combed with bone, cleaned with effort, with ritual, with hope. They stitched cleanliness into their days wherever they could fit it in a cloth bag of herbs, a pail of gray water, or a single clean shirt on a market day. So tonight as you tuck into bed, whether it's a straw mattress or memory foam, you carry that legacy with you. The human need to feel fresh, to scrape off the world and start again, even if the tools are humble and the standards shift. Because in the end, hygiene isn't about perfection. It's about the effort, the trying, the tiny daily declaration that you still care. So here you are, curled beneath your blanket, the firelight low, your eyes a little heavier than they were 20 minutes ago. You've walked barefoot through the ash-covered floors, scrubbed your teeth with fennel seeds, and combed lice from your hair with a carved bit of bone. You've survived bathless winters and vinegar rinses, slept beside pigs, and dodged flying chamber pots in crowded city streets. And somehow, after all of it, you made it. Maybe not spotless, but steady, resilient. Because medieval hygiene wasn't about sparkle. It was about survival in the dirt, not giving into it. And the more you think about it, the more it becomes clear these weren't dirty people. They were people living in a dirty world, doing their best with what they had. They weren't ignorant, they were practical, thoughtful, maybe even, dare you admit it, remarkably creative. A bundle of herbs tucked in a sleeve. Ash pressed into cloth. Rushes scattered across the floor. That was hygiene too. Now, as the air cools around you and the last embers of our story fade, take a breath. A real one. Let the scent of rosemary and firewood linger in your mind. Feel the scratch of homespun linen, the burn of vinegar on a scraped knee, the softness of a pig snuggled beside you on a winter night. You're safe now, you're warm. And most importantly, you're clean enough at least to dream without guilt. Thanks for joining me on this strange, grimy, and unexpectedly beautiful journey. Sleep well, dream long,